Great news, you can finally use cloud-native identities with AVD and FSLogix. No domain controllers required. Hey everyone, I'm Travis and welcome to my channel. I've been waiting a long time to make this video. One of the most requested features I get asked about is, can we run AVD with FSLogix in a fully cloud-native setup? Until now, the answer was no. You had to source users from Active Directory, which meant deploying domain controllers or Entra-DS. But that's changing. There's a new preview feature that lets you run AVD with FSLogix completely cloud-native. No on-prem AD, no Entra-domain services. In this video, I'll show you what you need to make it work. Before we dive in, do me a favor, hit like, subscribe, and share with your tech friends and colleagues. If you want to go deeper, check out my courses on udemy.com. The links are below. And a huge thanks to my channel members for your support. All right, let's get into it. Every time I told people using FSLogix required domain controllers, the reaction was always disappointment. Well, that's about to change. At Microsoft Ignite this year, one of the announcements was a preview feature that lets you use cloud-native identities for Azure Files. So what does this mean? It means you can finally set file and folder level permissions just like you would on an on-prem file share, but with cloud-native accounts managed in Azure and Entra ID. So if your company is all in on Entra ID and wants to use pooled host pools, you don't need Active Directory anymore. No more Windows AD, no more Entra domain services. Now, a quick heads up before we go any further. This feature is really early in public preview. Expect changes to the process and documentation as we get closer to GA. But I was so excited I had to make this video as soon as I could. I'll drop links to the docs I use below, and there are a lot. They'll probably change as well, but they'll help you get started. Here are the steps I used to get a working example in the demo coming up. First, enable Entra Kerberos authentication on the storage account, then assign default share level permissions for the storage account. After that, create the file, share, and FSLogix profile directory. Next, grant admin consent to the storage account service principal, then enable cloud-only group support, and make sure MFA is disabled for the storage account access. Then configure the client to retrieve Kerberos tickets. After that, set directory and file level permissions for FSLogix. Then enable FSLogix on the client. And finally, test it with an Entra joined session host and a cloud-native user account. There are a few prerequisites you need to know about. Kerberos for cloud-only identities requires Windows 11 Enterprise or Pro, single or multi-session, or Server 2025 with the latest updates. A storage account can't authenticate to multiple directories. The example coming up uses a new storage account. Only default share level permissions work for cloud-only identities, at least for now, and it's only available in the Azure public cloud. For the demo, I'm using a host pool with Entra joined session hosts and an Azure Files Provision v2 storage account. I'm using 2 Entra groups with test users in each. One for storage admins to manage profiles, and the other for end users to test FSLogix. All right, now that we've covered the basics, let's jump into the Azure portal to get started. Here we are in the Azure portal at the storage account we're going to use for this demo. This example is an Azure Files Premium Provision v2 storage account. Check out my video on Provision v2 storage accounts if you want more information on that. There's a link on the screen and below. A Premium v1 should work as well. The first thing we'll do is enable Entra Kerberos authentication. This is how we connect the storage account to a directory service. From data storage file shares, select Not Configured under Identity-Based Access. We're using Entra-only, so select Setup under Microsoft Entra Kerberos. And from here, select the checkbox. Selecting that gives us the option to configure domain services. We're staying with Cloud Native for this example, so we'll leave those blank. Also notice the information box that indicates we have to grant admin consent. We'll do that in an upcoming step. Click Save. Our first step is done, but there's a few more to go. While we're in here, let's go to step 2 to set up share level permissions. Per the Microsoft documentation, at the time of recording, cloud-only identities can only be assigned a default share level permission. That applies to all authenticated users. Default share level permissions assigned to the storage account apply to all file shares in the storage account. Go to Default File Share Permissions and set it to Enabled, and then select Storage File Data SMB Share Contributor, and click Save. Next, we'll create a share and a folder for the profiles. You can use an existing share on the storage account if you already have one. Let's go back to File Shares. Create a file share. This one will be called Entra FSLogix. This is a Provision v2 storage account. The capacity will be set at 32 gigs for testing, and we'll leave performance set to the recommended values. 32 gigs is the minimum amount we can allocate. Go to Backups. This is just a test, so for this example, we'll disable backups. It's a good thing to leave enabled in production, however. Go to Review and Create, and then create the share. That takes us to the share. Let's go to Browse and add a directory for profiles. We'll call it Profiles. That's where we'll store the user profiles. Some may put profiles at the root of the share, but I prefer to create a directory for them. We now have a share and a directory for our profiles. We'll come back shortly to set permissions. Our next step is to grant admin consent to the storage account service principal. We need to do this once for each storage account used with Entra Kerberos authentication. Go to Entra ID. You can use the Entra portal, or you can get there from the Azure portal. From Manage, go to App Registration and select All Applications. Locate and then open the storage account app. They start with a bracket and then storage account. From the storage account app, go to Manage API Permissions. From there, select Grant Admin Consent for your directory name and then Yes to confirm. That's it. That grants admin consent for the service principal. And again, we only have to do that once per storage account. Next, we have to update the tags attribute in the application manifest file on the app registration. That's a mouthful and it sounds complicated, but it's really pretty easy to do. From the app registration, the same app we just granted admin consent on, go to Manifest under Manage. We need to edit the JSON on this page. This is a step that I suspect will be automated once this feature is GA, but for now, we need to edit this JSON. Scroll down to Tags and add the following line between the brackets. I'll add a link to this step below so you can copy and paste the line of code right from the source. Save the changes once added. Now the tags attribute is updated in the manifest file. Next, we have to verify that MFA is disabled when accessing the file share on that storage account. Entra Kerberos doesn't support MFA when accessing the storage account. If MFA is enabled on the storage account, you may see system error 1327. Account restrictions are preventing this user from signing in. This could happen if there's a conditional access policy enforcing MFA and targeting all resources. Let's go to conditional access and view a policy. Everyone's conditional access policies are going to be different, but we want to make sure that any policies that enforce MFA targeting all resources and are applied to the AVD users have an exclusion for the storage account. If we go to one of these policies, for example, we'll look at MFA required. Let's open the target resources. That targets all resources, including the storage account. If this applied to our AVD users, we'd need to add an exclusion for that storage account. To do that, select a resource to exclude. We'll select a specific resource. Search for the storage account again. You can do that with a bracket followed by S. Select the storage account we want to exclude. And then save the changes. That will exclude the storage account from the conditional access policy requiring MFA. Next, we have to configure the client or the session host to retrieve Kerberos tickets. If this step is skipped, you'll get a login prompt when trying to connect to the share with NetUse and a message that system error 86 has occurred. We need to add a registry key to each client. The Enter ID joins session host for this example. In production, we could add it to the base image, use Intune to push it out, or use custom script extensions as part of the session host deployment. This example will be a little bit more manual. We'll use the run command on each session host. Go to the session host in virtual machines, and go to the run command under operations. Run a PowerShell script, and copy the registry add command and paste it into the command window. And as always, a link to this document is below. Let's click Run. We could also do this manually by logging into each VM. This is slightly easier. Repeat those steps on each Entra ID join session host that will access the storage account. Please note, this will prevent clients joined to on-premises Windows Active Directory from accessing storage accounts. If both Entra ID and Windows AD are needed, Kerberos realm mapping will be required. Next, we'll set file level permissions for FSLogix. The documentation needs some clarification in this section, but I'll try to summarize it for a working demo in this step. And keep in mind, I'm recording this very early in the public preview. I'm sure the documentation will be streamlined as we get closer to GA. Let's start by reviewing the two Entra groups this example will use to access the share. One is named Entra Storage Admin. This group has an account that will have admin access to the share. This group is similar to a domain admin group if this was a Windows share. There's also a Cloud AVD group. This group has all the cloud native end users that will use FSLogix when they access the host pool. Both groups are assigned to the host pool desktop application, so the users can log into the Entra ID joined host pool. This is where the documentation is a little bit confusing, at least for now. It states that we need to assign the storage file data SMB admin RBAC role to the user that's configuring the ACLs, and then that user has to mount the file share. That role gives them the same rights as if they mounted the file share with the storage account key. That's the case for hybrid environments to configure the NTFS permissions on the share, but not for the cloud-only solution. If we scroll down under Configure Windows ACLs, it indicates that we must configure ACLs from the Azure portal or PowerShell. Setting permissions from Windows File Explorer or ICACLS, I believe that's iCackles, won't work. Given that information, we don't need to add the RBAC role. And since we set the default share level permissions on that storage account, we can mount that file share if we logged into an Entra ID join client. We're going to log into AVD with the Entra Storage Admin account, and then mount the share so we can view permissions as we modify them. Here we are logged into a session host. The computer has to have Entra Kerberos Authentication enabled. We covered that earlier. Let's use the net use command to connect to the storage account and share. And you should do this from the command prompt. There's the net use command, followed by the fully qualified domain name of the storage account and the share. That finished successfully. If you got an error message, make sure you added the Entra Kerberos Authentication registry key and try to restart the client. Let's open File Explorer and go to the map drive. Great, we connected to it. There's a profile folder. Let's go to Properties, then Security, and open Advanced Options on that folder. That shows the current permissions, but if we try to change anything, we get an error message. We did this just to view the permissions. We can close security settings, but we'll come back to File Explorer shortly. Let's go back to the Azure portal. Next, we're going to modify the file and folder permissions for the profiles directory. It's important not to skip this step. FSLogix may work without setting file and folder permissions, but everyone will have access to everyone else's profile container. That would be a huge security risk. At the time of recording, we need to open the profile from a specific URL to configure the folder permissions. The URL is on the screen, and of course, there'll be a link below. You can try this with the default Azure portal. That may work by the time you watch this. If it doesn't work, use the link on the screen. From here, go to the storage account, File Shares, and open the file share. Select Browse from the menu on the left. There's a new menu option on the Browse page called Manage Access. We can open this on the file share or folders in the share. For this example, we'll open Manage Access on the profile directory. That's where the FSLogix profiles will be stored. This is what we've been waiting for. File and folder permissions native in Azure. We need to modify this a bit because it's not the correct permissions recommended for FSLogix. We're going to use the Microsoft documentation to set permissions. On the screen are the recommended ACLs for FSLogix. And you guessed it, there's a link for this below. We'll start by removing all identities except Create Owner. Let's edit Create Owners. Create owner should have modify access to subfolders and files only. So we'll modify that and click done. Next, let's add the group with admin rights and edit permissions. This group will have full control for this folder, subfolders, and files. Members of this group will be able to access users' profiles and do administrative tasks, like delete them or open up a profile to recover data. Next, let's add our user group and edit permissions. Users will get modify, but just to this folder. When the user logs in, modify on this folder only will give them rights to add a folder for their profile. And create owner rights will allow them to modify the contents of that folder, but they won't be able to access anyone else's profile folder. Once that's set, click Save. That sets the permissions. Let's go back and view the folder from our Windows client. Here we are back on the client with the share mounted. Let's go to Properties, Security on the folder, and Open Advanced. Okay, here's the updated permissions. And as you may have noticed, Windows isn't 100% on displaying the Entra groups yet. At least not with Windows 11 24H2. But the ID that starts with S-1-12 are Entra ID objects, and the settings match what we just configured. We can close Advanced Security. Next, we need to enable FSLogix on the clients. The minimum configuration required for FSLogix is just to enable it and provide a path to the share. On the screen, we have a few other values, including delete the local profile if a VHD should apply, the size, and to flip-flop the directory name. This is a minimal configuration just for testing. Update the file path variable with the path used for your environment, and we'll run this on the session host. We'll copy the block of code and go to the Azure portal. Here we are at the client we'll use for testing. Let's again go to Run Command under Operations. Select Run a PowerShell script. From there, we'll paste in that block of code and hit Run. We need to run this code on each VM in the host pool. And just like the registry key we added before, we could push it out with Intune, include it in the image, or run it with a custom script extension. We could also add all the required commands to a custom configuration script in the session host configuration. That way they'd be applied anytime a new session host is built. However you deploy the commands, add it to all VMs in the host pool. Here comes the moment of truth. Let's log into the host pool with a user account and verify FSLogix works. That's a good sign. Okay, we're logged in as an end user. Let's go back to the Entra Storage admin session, the one with File Explorer open. Here we are back on the Entra Storage admin session, the one with File Explorer open. By the way, I'm using one host pool. I'm logged into two different session hosts, one as the Entra Storage admin and the other one as the user. I'm using drain mode to control which session host that I log into. From here, let's go into Profiles. And that's the new profile folder for the user we just logged in as. Let's look at permissions on that folder. From Properties, we'll go to Security. With this configuration, only the user and the Entra Storage admin group can access the folder. Let's look at the profile container file. On the profile container itself, only the user and the storage admin has access. We can also see these permissions in the Azure portal. From the storage account, we'll go back to data storage, open up the file shares, go to our file share, select Browse, and we can drill down to the specific profile folder and manage access. And remember, if you don't see managed access, be sure you're using the preview Azure portal URL. And that matches what we saw in File Explorer. That is how we use the new Entra-only file share with FSLogix in AVD. And that's how you deploy FSLogix profile containers on Azure Files with cloud-native identities. Please don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you found this helpful. Thanks for watching.